You know, I say this a lot on the channel, and it never gets any less true, but we are living in a crazy time in professional wrestling. What with WWE and TNA recently announcing and making official their multi-year partnership. And though we don't know how either side is going to benefit from this long term, one thing we know for sure is that TNA is truly the forbidden door of professional wrestling when you look at all the different companies they've been working with over the last several years. But looking at the situation now, it does remind me a little bit of what a certain organization out of Philadelphia was doing about 30 years ago. This week on the Classic Review, it's time for us to look at ECW Cyberslam 1996 from February 17th at the ECW Arena in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This show was nominated by Ryan Hinckley over at patreon.com/wrestlingwithregret. I am cheating a little bit with this one because this show is not a pay-per-view in the traditional sense. ECW wouldn't have pay-per-views until Barely Legal the following year, but this is still a pretty significant show. A lot of very interesting things happening at this point in the company's history. It's really fascinating for me to look at this ECW stuff from this period because so many people's careers are in flux. Like, ECW definitely seems like the gateway between WWF and WCW because you have wrestlers kind of going from one company to the other and in the opposite direction, and ECW is kind of the conduit for all of that. And meanwhile, they're also blurring the lines between all three of these companies in a way that no one has really done before. And so ECW is truly beginning to capture an audience and really get a following amongst those wrestling purists out there who are tired of what the WWF and WCW are doing around this time. Remember, early 96, we have not reached the NWO period just yet. And, you know, Austin 316 is still many, many months away. And so we are far, far away from those things that are going to happen in those bigger companies that admittedly they're going to steal some elements from ECW. You know, Woman, for instance, she's on her way back to WCW and she tries in storyline to convince Sandman and Cold Scorpio to come back with her. Cactus Jack is portraying a WCW cast-off who's trying to regain favor with his Uncle Eric while simultaneously on his way out to work for the WWF in real life. ECW is working with Conan, who is a WCW intermediary for the Luchadors, and there's a lot of political gamesmanship being played when it comes to that. Also, there is the ECW debut of another WCW cast-off that really blurred those lines. More on that later. Missy Hyatt is a part of ECW now, a year removed from her hiatus after suing WCW for sexual harassment. She shows up recently before this show as a plant in the audience who kind of max on Stevie Richards in an attempt to get a date with Raven. By the way, if I were Raven, I would have never left this company because, like, wow, you tell me I get to be in a storyline where I'm, you know, kissing Beulah McGillicuddy and Missy Hyatt's hitting on me and I'm dating Kimona Watalea. You know, sign me up, Paulie, give me all the drugs. Also, Shane Douglas has come back to the land of extreme. He just had a cup of coffee in the Federation as Dean Douglas, the school teacher, but he had a lot of injuries and made a lot of enemies in the Clique, so he was not long for there. And speaking of guys who were pissed off at the Clique, Bam Bam Bigelow also arrived in ECW just before this show. It's worth pointing out, like I said, this was not a traditional pay-per-view. It was a show that coincided with ECW's internet convention happening that weekend. What a novel idea that was in 1996. And of course, wrestling conventions have popped up and sprouted all over the country, you know, in the more recent years, obviously. But it's kind of fun to think about what an internet connection or convention in 1996 would have looked like, especially with those, you know, hardcore internet fans that were definitely gravitating toward ECW at the time. So this show is interesting in that there's no traditional opening. There's no like opening graphics saying Cyberslam 96. Like I said, they took this show and broke it up into chunks for TV purposes in the weeks to follow. And they definitely formatted it that way because you have more than one moment in this show where Joey Styles is in the ring saying, "Welcome everyone to ECW TV. This week is looking great, folks." And then there's like a match that happens, you know, and Joey Styles will toss to commercial in commentary. And then he's like, "Okay, for you fans watching on home video, this is the exclusive stuff you're not going to see on television." So I thought that was very interesting. That's how they did that. The show gets underway right away with a six-man tag match as the Bad Crew and Judge Dredd take on the Dirtbike Kid, Devious Donnie Allen, and Vito Sandoff. The smaller guys run in and are immediately immediately beaten up. The fans are just booing the whole time as these smaller guys get the snot beaten out of them. I think Judge Dredd looks pretty ridiculous, even by 96 ECW standards. He's like a biker, and he's got like the pants with these like leather boots covering his legs, and this weird vest he has here. It's a pretty interesting look. And meanwhile, the Bad Crew looks to me like a dollar store Nasty Boys. Styles on commentary is comparing the Dirtbike Kid to other multi-sport athlete Bob Holly, and just as he does that, we get this double team clothesline that seals the win for the Bad Crew and Dredd. Suddenly the Sandman runs in and just canes a lot of them. The fans have definitely woken up for the Sandman as he just keeps yelling, "Yo!" And then he goes, "Now let's get extreme." Thanks, Sandman. I guess I'll just give this one a half star. Certainly a very interesting way to open up the show, but that is trademark ECW for you. Up next, ECW newcomer El Puerto Riqueno, sporting his best burlap sack as an entrance attire, takes on the Greek god Spiros Greco. He is a student of Boris Malenko out of Florida, making his ECW debut. Once again, the fans are kind of nonplussed about this matchup. They really couldn't care less. There's even kind of a collaborative, "These guys suck dick" chant happening as this match is going on. It's fairly academic, but I will say, watching this and having never seen these guys before, I think Spiros Greco, he's doing a couple of things in this match where, again, they're not blowing things out of the water, they're not doing crazy things, but just some basic moves are being done in ways I'd never seen done before. Like, Spiros does like a tackle drop down the long way at one point. He also does this snapmare over the back. Like, who is this guy? It's really interesting. Spiros just punishes the rookie for a long time, hits like a flying shoulder tackle and a pump handle slam to win this academic match as the fans chant, "You fuck sheep." I'm going to give it 1 star out of 5. This match was certainly just better and more complete, I think, than the previous 6-man squash, and it certainly showcased the athleticism of Spiros Greco, who I don't think lasts very long in ECW at this point, but I think it was just a very basic match, and that's pretty much all you can say. On we go now to our next match as the human suplex machine Taz, who's accompanied by the recent turncoat Bill Alfonso. He's taken on another jobber in Joel Hartgood. Taz, like I said, he's this very stoic, angry badass. Bill Alfonso is recently aligned with him, and they are hurtling toward a collision course with Sabu. That's not going to happen for another several months, a year or so after this, actually. But, they're planting the seeds for it. You got fans chanting for Sabu as this whole thing happens. But this is just going to be another kind of match to set up Taz's dominance and his viciousness in the ring here, because he's just working over this poor guy Hartgood. He fakes out on the leapfrog and hits the Tazplex, which Joey Styles seems to indicate he has just now invented. Someone should check on that. We get a hardway Tazplex, which leads to the Kata Hajime, the Taz mission. Hartgood taps, and the match is over. After the bell, Taz grabs the mic and calls his opponent just another victim, Cole. In comes Damage Control, these gimmicked EMTs, who I guess were part of ECW at this time. Taz just dumps Hartgood off the stretcher. Then in come the jobbers from the first match to get their asses kicked by Taz. Then Mikey Whipwreck runs in. He decks Alfonso. He's actually able to take down Taz, but he hits a flying nothing into a Tazplex. Another Taz mission is locked in. These fans are chanting for Sabu. Again, the fans want to see it, but, Taz just laid waste to everyone in front of him. Hoo boy, don't worry, because the match quality will pick up significantly soon after this matchup. But for now, I am going to give it a half star out of 5. They're really just kind of like whetting your appetite here with these very short, one-sided matches. We get Joey Styles' first introduction in the ring, welcoming the crowd to the show. He brings up the internet convention from earlier, which gets booed for some reason. Then the lights cut out, and it's Brian Pillman, the loose cannon, fresh out of his WCW contract, and he has suddenly arrived in ECW with his fabulous studded leather vest. This is honestly one of the most pivotal moments in Brian Pillman's career, for good or for bad, because once again, ECW trying to blur those lines between, kayfabe and shoot in a way that nobody was really doing at this time, because like I said, he was released from his WCW contract, and allegedly for just being this kind of loose cannon character going against the script. His last match in WCW was against Kevin Sullivan, where he famously went on the live mic and said, "I respect you, Booker man." Ooh, you can't say that. You can't say who's the Booker. So he was ixnayed from the company, but he shows up here and he says that his constitutional rights were taken taken away by some announcer in Atlanta. He calls Eric Bischoff Eric Jerkoff, and he says, "You can't take away my constitutional rights because I'm in Philadelphia, Big Pop, where the Constitution was written, Small Pop." He calls Bischoff a former coffee gopher for Vern Gagne. He calls him a piece of shit. And then Styles wants to go to a break, but Pillman cuts him off, and it starts really going off the rails here. He says that Bischoff is every one of these smart marks rolled up into one. And this is the point where he begins to lose the audience, because at the beginning, fans are, yeah, rah, rah, fuck Bischoff, this and that. But then he starts to turn his ire toward them, and then they all throw it back at him. And so he's definitely got them turned against him now by saying each and every one of you are smart marks. A mark is somebody who spends their last $20 on crack cocaine. A mark is someone who thinks OJ didn't do it. Like, okay, topical, I guess. And then he says, everyone here is smart marks. You're all y'all idiots and whatever. And then he says, I'm gonna whip my Johnson out and take a piss right here in this arena, which then gets a really big pop that he's gonna be doing that. Suddenly out come Todd Gordon and Paul Heyman and Shane Douglas as well. And they're like, this is not part of the deal. It's not part of the deal. Brian, what are you doing? And Pillman is going nuts. He calls Heyman Booker Man like he did with Sullivan. In comes security, and you can hear Douglas on the live mic saying, he's shooting, he's shooting. Yeah, make it really known that this is actually not a shoot, Shane. I love the fans here because they're chanting like, piss, 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 or let him piss, let him piss. And then suddenly Pillman gets in the face of this one fan slash plant in the audience who kind of looks like that redhead kid from Salute Your Shorts. And then Pillman just yanks him over the guardrail, gets him in the ring, and then stabs him in the head with a fork that he produced from his boot. So things are getting real serious looking now. Security gets in there. Then Shane Douglas gets on the mic and says, security's either going to throw this piece of shit out of the building or I'm going to beat him up myself. Then after a minute, Pillman is dragged out in one direction of the building and then he's brought back out, then be brought out the other way in the front door. I find it so interesting, when you look at the year 2000 and how Vince Russo was so crucified, and still is in many respects to this day, for the way he kind of catered to the smart marks and the internet fans back during that time. And it was considered so hack by so many people, like, oh, that's like not the way you should be focusing your attention. You shouldn't be making all these references to the internet fans. When Paul Heyman and Brian Pillman were doing this as early as 1996. And, some people considered it revolutionary back then and quite a refreshing thing to see that. I don't think people look back at this with the same kind of, rancor or, disappointment or whatever as they would about Vince Russo when he was in WCW, for instance. But this is a very, very crazy segment. And if you were just some kind of, fan who didn't really know the ins and outs, if you didn't read the Wrestling Observer and you weren't on the internet, you would have no idea why Brian Pillman, the Yellow Dog, is acting this way. I think this was a very, very effective way to again, blur those lines and to make the, the kayfabe and make the fantasy come off as reality. Because in reality, this was a very elaborate ploy by not only Pillman, but also Paul Heyman and also Eric Bischoff. Because the plan that Bischoff and Pillman had concocted is that, okay, you're going to get fired, we'll let you get fired or out of your contract in WCW, you'll develop this loose cannon gimmick in ECW, and then when we're ready, we'll bring you back as this character. But then, whoops, Pillman ends up signing with the WWF instead, so bit of a missed opportunity for Bischoff there. I think he got a little bit hoodwinked here by Pillman, who kind of used that WCW leverage probably as a way to get into the WWF. But this is still a very, very chaotic moment here, and I think this really does, I don't know if it stands the test of time necessarily or ages particularly well, but for the moment, I think it was very different, very unique, very eye-catching, and I think it definitely went a long way into building Pillman's stock as he was kind of, again, in flux between the WCW and the WWF. In our next matchup, Mr. Hughes takes on Buh Buh Ray Dudley. That's B-U-H space B-U-H Ray Dudley. I love that according to Styles, the lore of the Dudley family is that Daddy Dudley's name is Willie Loman Dudley. He's the traveling salesman. Ah, the theater reference. I love it. So, Bubba doing his dancing to Highway to Hell. That's quite a sight. Hughes has taken out Sign Guy Dudley and he jumps Bubba. Big Dick Dudley in the ring as well with a crutch. Hughes punches him. Big Dick just grabs his crutch and and breaks it over Hughes' back, Bubba with the splash and the pin to win, and that was it. I'm going to give this one 0 stars out of 5 because not like it was bad, it just wasn't anything. I mean, we've talked about angles disguised as matches in the past and that not really being much, but this I don't think even was that. It was just like Bubba Ray Dudley wins in like half a minute thanks to Big Dick Dudley hitting Curtis Hughes. And that was it. And speaking of Curtis Hughes, if you want a glimpse of what he was like in his earlier days in wrestling, then check out my AWA Team Challenge Series review I posted last week. You can look at that right here. Up next, out comes Mustapha Saed of the Gangstas, who, fun fact, beat me up in a squash match 10 years after this in late 2006. He and his partner New Jack were set for a match on this show, but New Jack was incarcerated in Georgia, so not able to attend here. Mustapha on the mic announces that he will take care of things himself tonight, then the ring announcer repeats all of that as if we didn't hear it. Then out comes manager Damian Kane with Lady Alexander. I legit first thought this guy was Jimmy Garvin. He offers Mustapha a job to work with him, shining shoes and whatnot. Mustapha says, I could use a job, a hand job that is, waka waka. Kane calls him a criminal and a jailbird, and that prompts Mustapha to snap and beat Damian up. Suddenly in come the Headhunters. The Hunters hit their version of the Power and Glory combo. Damian Kane back on the mic berates Mustapha after the fact, and he asks if any tag team in ECW is bad enough to face them. Suddenly we hear War Pigs playing over the PA, and who's that over there? It's the Bruise Brothers, aka the Harris Twins. Oh man, I thought it was gonna be somebody cool. Ron or Don fights Moffat or Mahim as Don or Ron takes on Mahim or Moffat. Joey Styles with, in my opinion, the call of the night. It's a double mint commercial gone hardcore. They brawl into the crowd for a couple of minutes, and then we go back into the ring. We get a big boot and a fat fuck moonsault simultaneously, a double pinfall, but the Bruise Brothers get the deciding cover and win this impromptu match. I'm going to give the whole segment from when Mustapha comes to the ring to the end of the tag team match 1.5 stars overall. You know, obviously disappointing that New Jack couldn't make for this show. I can only imagine what a Gangstas Headhunters match would have looked like, but it is exciting, you know, in one sense, that the Bruise Brothers, the Harris Twins, making their debut here in ECW. Again, these are former WWF guys, and you know, they are an impressive looking duo. Some might say they weren't properly used as Jacob and Eli Blue. So yeah, let's see them kind of break out a little bit as, you know, Ron and Don Bruise and see what happens, I guess. No one could imagine they're going to turn into, you know, Patrick and Gerald in WCW by 2000. We go back to Joey Styles in the ring, and he introduces an injured Tommy Dreamer and the mother of his child, Beulah McGillicuddy. So this is just one chapter in the very long-standing Raven-Tommy Dreamer feud. This goes way back to when they were, you know, kids at summer camp, and, you know, Beulah was the fat kid, and, you know, Tommy was the jock, and Raven was, you know, the lonesome nerd or whatever, the outcast. And then all these years later, Beulah's hot, and Raven has her under his spell, and together they are torturing poor Tommy Dreamer. But a recent development in the saga showed that Beulah revealed that she was actually pregnant, and it turns out it's not Stevie Richards' kid, it's not Raven's kid, it's Tommy's. And that's a big, you know, ECW moment is, oh my god, it's Tommy's. It's Tommy's, says Joey Styles. And so then we get these kind of series of, like, I guess you could call them romantic segments between the two of them, and it's just like, it's so cheesy to look back at this. But I think it's also funny that, oh man, they're so like into each other now, when like literally weeks before this, Tommy Dreamer was just giving Beulah pile drivers left and right. So Dreamer announces he has a torn shoulder as a result of his match with Raven the night before in New York, which is for shootsies. Suddenly out comes Raven, his rebound in Kimono Wanalea, Stevie Richards and the Blue Meanie, and they kind of surround Dreamer. Raven making some threats as Shane Douglas and the Bruise Brothers come out to back up Tommy. Shane takes Beulah away, and Raven says, "Get my girlfriend out of here with your demon spawn," and he tells Dreamer, "Prepare to die." Then the Bruise Brothers attack Dreamer, and they give him severe ring postitis. So this is another development in the long-standing feud between Dreamer and Raven. This would be a way for Tommy to be written off for his legitimate injuries, as Raven would continue to be the ECW champion for a while. The Bruise Brothers here joining Raven's nest, but they would not be very long in this company. They would soon re-debut for the WWF later in the year as Skull and 8 Ball of DOA. Up next, JT Smith, who identifies as Italian, makes his way to the ring to take on his former tag team partner, Axl Rotten. They show a clip from last month where he bops Axl with a microphone and betrays him. JT in the match here, jumping Axl mid-entrance, but he immediately regrets it. The fans are handing Axl weapons and he uses darn near all of them. What are these thin wood panels they're using? Can someone help me out with this one? Smith fights back with a chair and he DDTs Axl on the floor. We cut to former heavyweight champion Leon Spinks just sitting and watching. Boy, he looks enthralled. There's more back and forth in this matchup, and then JT just gets up on the top rope with a chair. You think he's gonna do like a chair moonsault or whatever, and then he just kind of falls down. I'm like, what the hell was that? Oh, it was a ruse to get Axl to turn around. That was actually pretty smart. JT smacks him with the chair and pins to win, spitting on Axl repeatedly. Gross. Then he actually goes through with the chair moonsault, and that looks like a rough landing. Hack Myers runs in to make the save. Smith wants to dance with him, but psych, he hits Shaw over and over again, but Shaw fires back with some more of his own Shaws, and they just keep fighting as the segment ends. I'm going to give the match 2 stars out of 5. I mean, it wasn't too much, but I have to say, I bit so hard on that fake out from JT Smith. That was actually a brilliant way to outsmart and screw over the babyface. So, you know, A+, thumbs up on that one for me. Up next, a triple dog collar match as Stevie Richards and the tag team champions, the Eliminators, that's Saturn and Cronus, take on Francine and the Pitbulls, numbers 1 and 2. Francine was laid out with total elimination about a month ago, and she was in a neck brace for a while, but she seems to have made a good enough recovery to be in this dog collar match. So Stevie, I don't think was meant to be with the Eliminators here. Now, in storyline, Stevie Richards and Francine are exes, but obviously Stevie is affiliated with the Nest. The Eliminators aren't really a part of that, but Jason, the sexiest man alive or whatever, he was supposed to be the Eliminators manager. He's working in Japan at the same time, so he can't make this show, which is why Stevie is the third man on this team. And during the build for this, it was kind of interesting, another kind of pivotal moment when you think back on it, when Francine and the Pitbulls kind of started cutting off locks of Saturn's long hair, and then to show you he doesn't really care, you see him in the back then taking some clippers and like shaving off the rest of his hair, which is kind of a pretty psycho moment. Also, a side note, doesn't have much to do with this match, but it is worth pointing out, Stevie and Blue Meanie, part of Raven's Nest, they have started to do their kind of parody shtick, and they're starting to call themselves the Fabulous Ones, complete with the strut in the ring. It's pretty funny, very wink and nod. Francine and Stevie are chained to each other. Stevie immediately super kicks Fran and somehow escapes the dog collar, so he gets to help beat up the Pitbulls. Cronus is attached to Pitbull 1, Saturn to Pitbull 2. The Eliminators hit their own version of the Power and Glory finisher. Must be a popular move. The Pitbulls are getting worked over. We get more Stevie kicks. Pitbull 1 fights back, putting Saturn in a row of chairs in the front row. That's awesome. More weapons, more crowd fighting. Pitbull and Cronus fight up into the crow's nest near Joey Styles on commentary. Saturn is broken away from Pitbull number 2, doing an assisted moonsault off the balcony, and then Pitbull 1 with a suplex to Cronus through a table up in that crow's nest. They make their way back to the ring, and we see Stevie looking menacing as he stands over Francine with a frying pan. We get this top rope Hurricane Rana, which Joey Styles at this point is calling a victory roll. Like, that's not a victory roll. Victory roll and a Hurricane Rana, two very different moves, but maybe that word is not in the lexicon yet because Joey Styles just calls it a victory roll. So someone help me out on this one. Was it just called that, and then like it wasn't until some like luchadors came into America they started changing it? Anyway, the Eliminators have Fran set up for another total elimination, but then Pitbull 2 just spears her out of harm's way. Honestly, that probably messed her up just as bad as a total elimination would have. Super bombs to Saturn and Cronus. They hit Cronus with a big double team cutter, and then we have an edit. Francine crawls onto Stevie to get the cover and the win, but the champs are not done. They lay out the Pitbulls, they hit Francine with a clothesline, and one more total elimination! I'm going to give it 3 stars out of 5. It's certainly the most action-packed, most back and forth, most dramatic match we have seen so far on this card tonight. The dog collars are an interesting additional element, but considering it was so easy, seemingly, for everyone to just kind of get them on and off, it did kind of take away from that added peril of the dog collars, but I still think they explored the space really well, had some really key, dynamic, dramatic moments, and, very very death-defying things happening in the balcony crow's nest area that were pretty fun to watch. And yeah, it was definitely a step up from what we'd seen so far, and fortunately the quality will only get better from here. Up next for the ECW World TV title, Cold Scorpio defends against Sabu. Now, a while ago, Scorpio was actually a double champion because he was the TV champion and one half of the tag champs with the Sandman. But a couple of months before this, he lost a winner-take-all match against Mikey Whipwreck, so losing all the belts in the process thanks to Cactus Jack. More on that story later. But about a month before this, he regained the TV title and he holds the record for the most reigns with the belt at 4. Sabu immediately brings a chair into the mix. It falls out of the ring. He hops onto the timekeeper's table outside and breaks it. They manage to recover. There's a big dive over the top into the outside right in front of the sign that reads "Pay per Sabu." Back in the ring, Scorpio escapes a powerbomb and hits his own and follows up with a big guillotine leg drop. Scorp has taken his time now. He brings another chair in and throws Sabu face first into it. He wants to do it again, but Boo gives it back to him. We get a chair-assisted dive. Both men fall out of the ring. Sabu is on a roll until he eats a super kick, and Scorpio just trucks the challenger with a chair after that. There's some more exciting back and forth here, and at this point, again, you can tell they were filming this for TV because Joey on commentary tosses to commercial break and he says, "Okay fans, now this is the exclusive footage you're not going to see on TV," which is mostly rest holds. Do these guys know how to work a TV match or what? Sabu hits a big flying move and seems to hurt his leg, which affects him the rest of the match. Scorpio with a perfect top rope moonsault but can't cover in time for the win. He sets up a chair, then changes his mind about it. He teases a tombstone but just does the squash instead. Still can't put Sabu away. Scorpio with a painful looking yoink into the ropes. He goes for a twisting splash, but Sabu moves. Cold with a crazy sunset flip and a kick out. The crowd showing lots of love for this match at this point. Boo with a top rope victory roll for real this time. Scorpio with a fireman's carry looks to dump Sabu out of the ring, but he takes him down with him. Boo goes for the moonsault, but the guardrail takes about 97% of that one. We now have a table set up beyond the barricade. Sabu jumps off the chair, off the rope, flying over the guardrail, and takes nothing but table as Scorpio has moved. The gut-wrench powerbomb is countered, the moonsault's kicked out of, the backflip leg drop is kicked out of. We get a top rope leg drop with the chair assist, and Sabu kicks out again. He manages to fight back, hits a top rope Hurricane Rana, but still not enough. 450 splash connects, but the champ is not going for the cover. With 1 minute left in this 30-minute time limit, he goes for a flying nothing with chair, but misses. Sabu hits the leg drop with it again, then another kick out as time expires. It's a time limit draw, and Scorpio holds on to his championship. I'm going to give it 4.5 stars out of 5. This was a fantastic matchup here. Really just great showing from both guys here. I think Sabu, especially for the amount that he puts himself through in this matchup, to still look very tough and really giving Scorpio a run for his money. So many interesting near falls. I think the timing of the very end of the time limit draw might have been screwed up a little bit, but it didn't take anything away from what we had already seen up to this point. But I think there was, good flow, good back and forth. This was just a very quintessential ECW match in all the good ways. And if you watch one match on this show, it's really got to be this one. Up next, former trainees at Dominic DeNucci's wrestling school in Pittsburgh do battle as Shane Douglas takes on Cactus Jack. As I mentioned at the top of this review, the franchise has recently returned to ECW amidst great fanfare. Of course, he did have that time as Dean Douglas, so he's still trying to slough off the stank of the Dean Douglas character as he is here in ECW once again. Meanwhile, Jack has undergone quite the transformation of sorts in ECW. He's taken on this very anti-hardcore gimmick. It's very similar to what he would end up doing many years later during the second ECW One Night Stand in 2007. He's very much anti-weapons, anti-blood, anti-violence and this and that. He wants to try and talk guys like Mikey Whipwreck and Tommy Dreamer out of going down that same path, to spare yourselves, the violence and the scars. The Kane Dewey promo kind of brought about all this, that famous promo of his. And talking about earlier that winner-take-all match. It was Jack who helped Mikey Whipwreck win the matchup. He asserted himself as Mikey's tag team championship partner, trying to get him to join Raven's Nest, but Mikey didn't like the way he won those belts. He doesn't really want to be teaming with Cactus again. Meanwhile, Raven doesn't want Mikey to be there in the group, and so Jack is just kind of caught in the middle of all that strife between Whipwreck and Raven. Meanwhile, Shane Douglas is trying to coax the Hardcore back out of Jack here, and he got the ball rolling on that on an episode of TV a couple weeks before this in a tag team matchup where he intentionally took a drop toe hold face first into the chair that Jack had set up. And he did that, he said, to prove a point and to try and get the extreme out of Jack again, which is a very interesting, dare I say, counterintuitive strategy. Like, yeah, I'm gonna break my own face to get you to do it again. Also, one of my favorite things about Jack during this time is he's wearing a WWF shirt, and on the back it says join the new revolution, because everyone knows at this point he's going to be heading to the WWF pretty soon. So there's this whole like contingent of fans saying you sold out, this and that. So it's pretty funny to see him embracing that and for the fans to kind of be in on it, essentially. As the match begins, they point out that the referee is Brian Hildebrand, another student of DiNucci's training school, along with, you know, Shane Douglas and Cactus Jack. So kind of a cool mini reunion. Jack in somewhat of an early preview of his Mankind look, but Shane rips off the jacket and the shirt. Cactus wearing a shirt with Eric Bischoff's face painted on the front, and on the back it says, "Forgive me, Uncle Eric." That is so funny. On the outside, Shane crotching Cactus to death with a crutch. We get an axe bomber by the franchise. Every time Shane uses this crutch, it looks as painful and incorrect as possible. There is a "Dean is dead" chant as Douglas continues the punishment, suplexing Jack spine first on the barricade. Youch. He somehow manages to leap off the top rope and over the barricade onto Cactus in the crowd. I had no idea he had that in him. Douglas Pillmanizes Cactus's leg before people called it that, and then we get like an amazing series of different chants towards Shane here. We get an Ahmed Johnson chant, which I love. There's also a Razor chant because, you know, Razor and Dean had a very tumultuous relationship in the WWF. Then it turned into a "Let's Go Shane" chant, which at first I thought was like a "Let's Go Sting" chant, which I'm like, that's kind of an interesting choice for the fans. Like, if you really want to piss Shane off, wouldn't you chant "We want Flair"? Somehow Jack recovers and puts the hurt on Douglas. He works over the leg, hits his punches, and Douglas just falls out and onto the timekeeper's table. Jack with a big splat onto it with Shane underneath on the floor. Jack sets up the chair, hits that drop toe hold onto it, the same move he used to beat Shane a couple weeks earlier, but not enough here. Things are looking dire, but suddenly referee Hildebrand passes something metallic to Shane, who cold cocks Jack with it. And it turns out they are handcuffs. Shane cuffs Cactus behind his back, and we get an early preview of the '99 Royal Rumble. Shane with many unprotected chair shots to the head. They don't quite look nearly as bad because I don't think Shane's putting as much into the chair shots as, say, The Rock did in '99, but also, like, this chair is like made of plastic, so I don't think it's gonna hurt quite as much as a steel chair would, but that's just me talking. Shane then grabs the mic and uses his real name, and he has the referee to ask Jack if he gives up. Cactus keeps calling for Vince at first, then he starts calling for Mikey in the back. One more dink by Douglas, he locks in the figure 4, then in comes Mikey with a chair, who in one quick motion whomps Jack right in the face. Holy shit. Jack is out, referee makes the count, and Shane wins. I give it 4 stars out of 5. This match was way better than I thought it was going to be going in, because I love the fact there was this nice blend of traditional in-ring action with like the weapons-based brutality, a level of brutality I hadn't really seen out of Shane Douglas at all at this point. So it was really kind of shocking in that sense. And then the ending with Whipwreck, where it was like, you know, I don't condone chair shots to the head. I don't look back at them with fondness or anything, but just the way that last one was done, it was so quick and just a bam, and the noise and the selling and all that was just so well done. And it's like, that stays with me, that kind of swiftness, the way that finish took place. This would end up, you know, leading to Jack's final ECW match in March against Whipwreck. Jack would win that matchup, and then by the end, even though the fans spent months chanting "You sold out" and this and that, they would start chanting "Please don't go" at the end of that match. And then he would have this dance off with with Stevie Richards and the Blue Meanie after that final match to New York, New York, and it was fully considered it one of his greatest or his best or happiest wrestling moment. And, you know, it's just very interesting how that all wrapped up, and what a legacy that Jack left behind at ECW as he goes on to greener pastures in the WWF as Mankind. In our main event for the ECW World Championship, Raven, who's accompanied by Kimona Wanalea, defends against the Sandman, who's accompanied by Missy Hyatt. A couple weeks before this show, Raven beat Sandman to become the champion for the first time. And as far as Missy Hyatt, like I mentioned earlier in this review, she kind of debuted wanting to go after Raven, but then by the end, she kind of changes her position and starts aligning herself with the Sandman. And that's how we've come to this matchup here. Raven starts out hot by throwing himself to the outside into a reverse bear hug. Sandman, with a big-time stalling brainbuster, just beating down on Raven for quite a while, throwing himself over the top as well. Blue Meanie gets on the apron to provide the distraction. We get a DDT on the chair, but the referee is out of position thanks to Missy. Sandman DDTs Raven, then Kimona jumps in. Now we have Missy in there, and Joey Styles shrieks, "Catfight!" More referees get involved to try and break it up as Styles compliments the camera work. Then Stevie Richards comes in, hits his kick on Sandy. We get a kick out. A body slam attempt turns into a ref bump. Sandman goes up top and hits an ugly top rope leg drop. We get another ref bump. Then the quote fabulous ones jump in. Sandman canes Meanie and the Bruise Brothers, but he takes the double slam. Sandman still kicks out of that. Raven hits a something on Sandman. They both go up top. Sandman taking a face plant into the open chair. Wow, that's a bump. DDT on the chair. Raven wins and retains. The fans are chanting bullshit. They throw some trash into the ring as the heels take their leave, but Meanie sticks around to mock the Sandman, and I think we all know where this is headed. The Sandman is revived by the spilt beer. Shades of Popeye. Meanie swings the kendo stick right into Sandman's face, so he throws some receipts. He fights off the rest of the nest, then yells into a dead mic for a minute until Missy Hyatt returns with some beers, some smokes. They stand there and just kind of look at each other for a while, and that's how we end the show. I give it 1.5 stars out of 5. You know, I wasn't expecting a Matt Classic between, involving the Sandman and like a half dozen guys interfering at ringside. There was some fun action in this. It was certainly chaotic and action-packed in some fun ways, but it was also kind of a train wreck. It was smart for the show to end on kind of a positive note. Even though Sandman didn't win the match, he still got to stand tall alongside Missy Hyatt. This relationship would continue several months into 1996, and eventually Missy would betray and denounce the Sandman and just kind of take her leave. But this was the very beginning of this relationship with the two of them. And I haven't watched enough of Missy and Sandman to really judge it, but I will say, just kind of looking at it just kind of from afar, like looking at this early thing, I'm like, I don't know if this makes sense. Like, I don't really see the chemistry between the two of them, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe if I watch more of Missy and Sandman down the line, like, we'll see some of that form and grow. But I think that, Missy Hyatt in ECW is a very interesting fit, considering how she was portrayed in WCW for a long time. Like, seeing her here with a bit more of an edge to her in ECW, I think that's a good, like, natural progression for her, especially where wrestling is headed in '96. But I think that, yeah, it's an interesting way to end the show. It doesn't really end with any kind of big resolutions, but again, ending strong with Sandman and Missy standing tall. That being said, I give ECW Cyberslam 1996 a B-. Now, it is kind of a clunker at times, but on the whole, it's not a bad show. It is distinctly ECW. All the things you associate with ECW, like the wild brawls, the wacky gimmicks, the hardcore, like the more technical aspect of wrestling, it's really all there, And I think that the bad stuff doesn't linger long enough for you to dwell on it or care about it. And the stuff that is good, I think, is really good and really helps kind of elevate this overall show. But what did you think of Cyberslam 96, folks? And how about this review? Why don't you fire up your modem and turn on AOL and search the keyword regret and leave something in the comment section below. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up if you like it, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon for all the notifications. Now, next time here on the Classic Review, I'm going to be revisiting my very first Classic Review from several years ago. I'm talking about WCW Super Brawl 2000. It's the first step in my year-long arc, my mission to finish the story, by which I mean all the remaining WCW 2000 pay-per-views. But it starts with this revisit of Super Brawl 2000 with new insights and good production values. But until then, I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.